We could have some really strong storms today, especially just to the west of the Appalachian Mountains. These storms could contain some damaging winds, hail, even an isolated tornado threat here. Plus, we're really watching the tropics this time of year for something developing in the Atlantic, and we could be looking at something in the Gulf. It's Friday, September 5th. We're updating your weather. Today, do you remember what happened this day in weather history? If you live in the Carolinas, you probably remember Hurricane Fran made landfall. And boy, we were looking at an ugly satellite image as we moved into September 4th, and by September 5th, this thing was coming ashore into the evening hours. Wilmington was on the front right side of this storm, so it experienced the highest wind gust at 137 miles per hour, and it dumped a lot of rain, especially as it moved inland. So if you live anywhere in this part of the country, you probably remember Hurricane Fran. It caused a lot of problems along Topsail Beach. Fortunately, today we're not looking at anything like that, but we're always watching the tropics. National Hurricane Center says there's a 90% chance of this wave forming into something over the next 7 days. We look at the newest guidance from the European overnight. This is the ensemble data coming in, still developing this thing as it moves close to the islands here. The question will be, where does it go? There's not a lot of agreement as to where it goes, but we're starting to see some consensus, I think, overall, pulling it further to the north. It's following a track very similar to Aaron, and also, I think you watch behind this. I mean, we're approaching the season where it's peak season for tropical development. I still think you watch the Gulf as the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation phase, moves into phase 1 and 2. This is just, I'm telling you, this is a phase where we could see more storms across not just the western Atlantic, the Caribbean, also into the Gulf. All right, the upper level pattern certainly shifting here. We talked about that yesterday if you joined the video. And if you're looking for a winter outlook, I do those every single week. I spent some time in TV. I worked as a chief meteorologist years ago. Time is a little more limited there. So if you like to geek out on weather features, subscribe and come back, join the community. And by the way, thanks to all the new subscribers who've come over. More than 26,000 of you have subscribed, so I'm pretty shocked by that. So thank you for all of your support, especially the OGs that have been here for a while. Here's a look at the upper pattern that's affecting many of you today. The cool weather continues across the Great Lakes into the Northeast. In fact, we're going to cool down into the Northeast as this chilly air sweeps through. As we move into next week, the weather pattern drastically shifts. We start to see that trough lift out, more of a zonal flow from east to west. If anything, we start to get some troughing back across the west. This brings some cooler weather into the Pacific Northwest, even parts of California, maybe even Southern California, and then a ridge starts to build back across the Great Lakes. So temperatures will be on the way up, and we've got one heck of a storm swinging into Alaska. At least it looks that way heading into next week. Let's take a wider look at these storms over the next couple of days. I think this is a great way to look at it. We're looking into North America. I know there's a lot of lines here, but to me, this helps me sort of see the upper pattern. You've got the red lines, also your height lines in blue. You can see your trough here in the east. Green is your precipitation. Blue is snow, which it's trying to start to fall across the Arctic. We've got a big storm that's going to be moving into Alaska this weekend. That's going to bring some heavy rain here. Also, a front that's swinging through that's going to bring the severe weather today. Continues to push off the coast, and then it's going to kind of stall here. Your trough starts to lift out. Showers move back across the upper Midwest, and then another big storm moves into Alaska heading into next week. That's going to bring a lot of moisture in, a lot of wind too, and some snow across parts of the North Slope. As we move into next week too, we're going to see some showers increase back across parts of the northern U.S. into parts of southern Canada. That's going to spin through, but what we're not seeing is another intrusion of Arctic air across the United States. Temperatures, I think, closer to normal, maybe even above normal in some areas. And then we're looking into the tropics. What's going to be happening here as we head into next week? The overnight European tried to develop this weird low here and move it inland. Now, does this develop into something? We're in a favorable zone. There's some decent ridging here aloft. I think you watch early next week for something. At the very least, some heavy rain could be moving into parts of the southeast. And then the storm that's moving into Alaska slams into parts of British Columbia. And look, it stays active across this region with more storms moving in. This happened last year. I talked about that in my winter update, which I'll link below. But we had a screaming jet stream that pulled into the northwest, also British Columbia. That locked up a lot of the cold air as we headed into winter. But the ocean temperatures are much warmer this year. I think that could lead to some ridging, which would lead to more cold outbreaks this winter. Those are the details I like to look at least once a week. Another one's coming on Monday or Tuesday. Not sure yet. So subscribe and come back. Severe weather today from West Virginia, Pennsylvania. The strongest storms will be across southern Ohio, West Virginia, into Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe even as far south as Alabama and Mississippi. The main threat, damaging winds, some hail, and there could even be some stronger storms back into parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. But just to the west of the mountains, the Appalachians that is, that's where we're going to see the strongest storms, really from the southern corner of PA, the northern panhandle of West Virginia, southeast Ohio, and then really along the West Virginia-Ohio border, Marietta down to Point Pleasant, Charleston here, and then further back to the southwest into a good part of Kentucky, and then back into Tennessee. It's not a huge risk for tornadoes, nor is it a huge risk tomorrow, but there still is an isolated chance of a few strong storms that could produce some tornadoes into parts of the Northeast. Let's time some of the storms out. We'll roll through this pretty quickly. As we move into the afternoon here on Friday, we're going to see the storms fire up across Kentucky, Tennessee, especially once we get toward the evening hours. Some of them will fire as early, I think, as maybe even the dinner time, possibly a little bit earlier, but they'll really start to ramp up as we head through the evening hours, some of them lingering into the nighttime. So once we get towards midnight, 11, 10 o'clock, they'll ramp up, and once we move over into the early morning hours of Saturday, they'll likely start to weaken. Some of them will hold their strength, but we'll start to see things flatten out. We're entering a cooler time of day, but still some heavy rain, some rumbles of thunder, some gusty winds, and then as we head into Saturday, everything pushes to the east. So there's your severe weather threat across the Northeast, really from the mid-Atlantic all the way up to Maine, and then as far south, I think even into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, some of these storms could get strong. And we're watching this low. There it is, starting to show up in some of the shorter range models. Watch this feature heading into next week. Temperatures across the east today, cooling down at least into the northeast as we head into the weekend. Highs on Saturday, back into the 60s and 50s even across parts of the northern Great Lakes. Southern Michigan, you're back into the 60s, but the UP, parts of the northern Lower Peninsula could be stuck in the 50s, maybe even the 40s with clouds around, and then that cool air moves into the northeast, and the cool air also pushes all the way nicely into the south. Further to the west we go. Let's talk about the showers that we're dealing with across this part of the country, moving through Kansas, also into Oklahoma this afternoon and this evening. Some of the storms could start to pulse up as we head into the evening hours across southern Arkansas, North Texas. We talked about Tennessee. These storms could drop some hail, some damaging winds also possible with some of the stronger pulses, just some steady rain further to the north across southern Missouri, also northern Arkansas. Showers, clouds will stick around as we head into Saturday. Just to the north of our front, we'll start to eventually see some of that dry air punch in and will clear out, and then temperatures cool down nicely. Some rain moving back into Texas too as we head into Sunday, also into New Mexico, and some of that rain could be heavy today. Temperatures across the plains are cooling down, and we're going to see that cool air eventually start to sink to the south. I would say cool and damp across parts of Missouri, Oklahoma, where we're going to be under the low clouds, showers. Temperatures may not get out of the 50s. Eventually, we'll start to dry out as that cool Canadian air starts to push to the south. Now, the further south you go, the more clouds you'll see, but more sunshine, especially the further north you go, with some pleasant conditions if you like 60s and 70s. Rain possible across the southwest as we head through today. Could be heavy at times. Flooding possible, especially across some of the burn scar areas into New Mexico, down into parts of Arizona. Some heavy rain possible too, especially into the mountains. Flooding always a concern when you get big downpours across the southwest as some tropical moisture moves north. That pushes east into Colorado, New Mexico, even into Texas as we head into Sunday, and then rain chances going up across the Pacific Northwest. Temperatures across the west, pretty warm, especially across the far Pacific Northwest. Another day of hot weather. Eventually we'll start to cool off some. Saturday, another warm day. Sunday, temperatures a little bit cooler. It's slowly cooling down, and we've got a pretty decent cool down on the way, at least for the Pacific Northwest as we move toward Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Instead of 90s and 100s, you're back into the 70s and 80s into eastern Oregon and Washington as temperatures get closer to where they should be. All right, if you like winter forecasting, a complete update is right over here. We dig into some of the big global features. We'll talk all about it. I'll see you there.